What's up, guys? I wanted to do a quick follow-up video from last week's video on Jeremiah 29:11, which I said I think sometimes we misinterpret or distort. Now, before we move forward, if you haven't seen it, click here, click down here, and you can watch that video, or else this might not make sense. Now, the pushback that I got last week when I said, hey, I think it might have been a specific promise for a specific people, or that God was doing something in their culture and at that time that was specific to them, people said, well, okay, well, does it apply to us at all? Or can the Spirit take those verses and be truth, or give us truth in those verses? And the answer is yes, but I want to kind of say maybe how, or chat about that for another second. So what's really interesting that I didn't mention last week is that Jeremiah 29:11, or the verse after that, Jeremiah 29:12, about the captivity of Babylon, if you watched last week's video, is actually brought up in another passage. So we don't really have to guess, because God kind of says, hey, this is what that really meant. Now, the answer to that is in Daniel 9. So Daniel was written just a little bit after Babylonian captivity, which is what Jeremiah 29:11 was written to in the first place, like we talked about in last week's video. Now, what's really interesting is listen to this prayer. So in chapter 9 of Daniel, he prays. It says, in the first year of Darius, I, Daniel, perceived that in the books the number of years that according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet must pass before the end of the desolation of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. And then he says, so then I turned my face to the Lord, seeking him in prayer and pleas for mercy with fasting and sackcloth and ashes, and he prayed to the Lord. So Daniel is in a place where the 70 years are wrapping up. And so he sees Jeremiah 29:11 and Jeremiah 29:12, the fact that God has a plan. He wants his people to prosper, because God is really saying in there, hey, you're in exile, you're in captivity, but I am with you. I love you. I have plans for your prosper. I have plans for your welfare. And so Daniel brings those up, right, and says, hey, God, you said it would take 70 years until we come back out of exile, and 70 years is coming to a close, so where are you? What's the answer? What's going on? And so he prays in 9, if you want to read it yourself, and he prays for a long time, and then at the end of that chapter in 24, God answers him, and God says this. In verse 24, it says, 70 sevens are decreed about your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, and to bring an everlasting righteousness, to seal both the vision and the prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. So God says, yeah, I said 70 years, but 70 sevens in Hebrew kind of means 70 times 7. So he goes, the real coming out of exile, the real restoration of the temple, because by the way, in this time they had a temple, but it was under desolation. It had pretty much been destructed, and God's glory had left that place because of sin, and so they wanted to restore the temple. The temple was their identity. It was the place where heaven and earth met. It was where God dwelled with their people, and he says, yes, that will happen. The ultimateness of it, something that you maybe don't even know is coming, will happen 70 times 7, 490 years. Now, if you do the math and you read this passage with Daniel and you multiply out 490 years, guess what? That's actually the time when Jesus shows up on the scene. 490 years later, Jesus comes, which is then God becoming king in that moment, saying, hey, the true exile isn't you going back to Jerusalem, or the true promise, of Jeremiah 29:11 isn't you going back to Jerusalem. The true promise, my plans for your welfare, my plans that you might prosper, are actually met, promised, and delivered in Jesus. He is the one for our welfare. He is our prosperity. He is our riches, as Ephesians says, and he is our true temple. They wanted the glory and the place where heaven and earth met to be restored, and God comes on the scene and says, that's me. Jesus is the place where heaven and earth meet. Jesus is the true temple that then moves and comes around and walks and brings forgiveness of sin and atonement and iniquity, like God declares in verse 24. And so if you quote Jeremiah 29:11, if you enjoy that verse, that God has a plan for your life, the truth is, yes, that is for you. There is some specificnesses, there's specificity of that for the Israelites, but you can take from that is for you. You can take that promise. In Corinthians, it says that every promise finds yes and amen in Jesus Christ, but know that that is the fulfillment. It's not talking about that you might be rich or that you might only be healthy for your prosperity, but it's, hey, his Jeremiah 29:11, that his welfare and his plans for your prosperity is that you might get more of Jesus. You might dwell in him. You might abide in him, and you might find and understand more of his grace. So I hope that clears a little things up from last week, and you put those together and you can see a fuller picture of what he was saying there. So love you guys.